Hello, and welcome to Strengths Studio, hosted by Salem State Career Services. Created by our team of Gallup-Certified CliftonStrengths coaches, this podcast is your studio, where we help you apply your own unique strengths to succeed as a college student and get career ready. Think of us as your personal trainers, and CliftonStrengths as your path to the finish line that will help you achieve your goals. Thanks for tuning in to Strengths Studio each week and taking a powerful step towards your bright future. Hello, and welcome back to Strengths Studio. My name is Erin Ahart, and I am one of the Gallup-Certified CliftonStrengths coaches here at Salem State Career Services. Before you listen to this episode, please make sure that you've listened to episode 1 and that you've taken the CliftonStrengths assessment so you can truly engage with our content. And again, you can learn how to do this by listening to episode 1 or by reading the show notes. Salem State students, remember, you can take this assessment for free. In episode 1, we learned that CliftonStrengths is an assessment tool that helps people identify and apply their own unique strengths. And to recap, CliftonStrengths is recognized by more than 90% of Fortune 500 companies and is known to help people achieve more and have an excellent quality of life. So knowing your strengths will really help prepare you for the workforce and help you be more successful as a college student right now. So now that we know what the assessment is and why it's important, we're going to dive deeper into what your strengths really are and how they differ from talents. So first, we'll talk about talents. And to start off today, we're going to do a fun activity called Raise Your Hand If You Almost Always. Now, I know that many of you are probably listening to this podcast while doing something else, so definitely don't feel like you have to raise your hand. But I'm going to read off a few scenarios, and instead of raising your hand, try to think about which of these statements apply to you. So to start off, number 1, raise your hand if you almost always talk to someone new at social events, parties, at the grocery store, and wherever you go. Now, if this is you, you might have woo in your top 5 CliftonStrengths like I do. People with woo love having a wide network of friends. Number 2, raise your hand if you almost always keep your papers and assignments organized on your computer. If this is you, you might be an arranger. These people are great at figuring out how people and information can be arranged for maximum productivity. Number 3, raise your hand if you almost always need to win at sports or video games, even when you're playing by yourself. This strength is competition. Number 4, raise your hand if you almost always make lists for yourself and enjoy checking things off of those lists. This strength is achiever, and these people love getting things done. Number 5, raise your hand if you almost always ask a lot of questions in class. This strength is learner, and people with learner find joy in learning lots of new things. And finally, number 6, raise your hand if you almost always tend to focus on the positives of any situation. This strength is positivity. I also resonate with this one. And these people tend to look on the bright side. So, now that we've done this activity, if you raised your hand for any of these situations, these are all natural talents. And as you can see, talents don't just include being a great musician or being a great athlete, but talents can include asking questions in class, focusing on the positives of a situation, and so much more. Talents are things that we do every day, usually without even knowing it. You might remember in episode 1 that I said CliftonStrengths is based off of 34 talent themes or categories of talent that we have. Your top 5 strengths that you received when you took the assessment are actually the talents that show up the most for you. The other 29 strengths might not be as dominant or show up as often as your top 5, but each of us still have all 34 talents. And the reason that CliftonStrengths is based off of 34 talent themes is because we start with our talents and finish with our strengths. Talents are naturally recurring patterns of thought, feeling, or behavior that can be productively applied. And a strength is the ability to consistently provide near perfect performance in a specific activity. So we start with our talents and finish with our strengths, because if you invest and put energy into your top 5, you can turn them from talents into strengths. So we really want to take what we're naturally good at and spend time practicing at it so we can consistently perform at a high level in those areas. So here's an example of investing in a strength. I played basketball in 8th grade, and my dad really wanted me to try out for the county free throw competition. I was naturally pretty good at basketball and made 4 to 5 out of every 10 free throw shots. So I practiced every day after school to get ready for the competition and began to make 8 to 9 out of every 10 shots consistently. I had turned my natural talent into a strength because I consistently performed at a high level. And while I didn't win the county competition, I did win the free throw competition for my district. So you might be wondering, how do I invest in a strength like positivity or being a learner? Well, that's exactly what we'll be using this podcast to help you with. So please make sure that you continue listening to future episodes. But before we start talking about how to actually invest in our strengths, I want you to start by thinking about how your top 5 strengths connect to your life. So for our next episode, try to think of one example of how each of your top 5 strengths shows up for you. Like I said in the raise your hand activity, someone who has woo in their top 5 strengths might be a social butterfly at parties, and someone who has competition might always need to win at sports or video games. One of my top 5 strengths is empathy, and the way this shows up for me is that I'm really good at sensing other people's emotions. A resource that will help you make these connections is your top 5 CliftonStrengths report that you received when you took the assessment. The report provides definitions of each strength in your top 5, so it'll really help you understand your strengths better and connect them to your own life. And you can access this by logging back into your account and downloading your report. I highly, highly recommend printing or saving your report on your computer so you can access it later, because you'll need this as we continue to learn more about our strengths in future episodes. But again, for our next episode, please try to think of one example of how each of your top 5 strengths applies to your life. Next week, we'll talk about the positive and negative aspects of our strengths, which we call balconies and basements. But until next time, thank you so much for listening to Strengths Studio. Please remember to rate this podcast and share it with your friends and classmates. And please connect with us by emailing strengths@salemstate.edu, or you can also follow us on Instagram at SSU Career. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a great day. I'll see you in episode 3.